The rain poured relentlessly, each droplet cold and unforgiving against Lisa's already shivering skin. The night had settled into an eerie silence, broken only by the distant sound of cars rushing past the gas station. Lisa pulled her thin, oversized coat tighter around her, but it did little to keep out the chill. Beside her, little Ryan curled into a ball, his small body trembling under the worn-out blanket she had managed to find the night before. He was asleep, at least she hoped he was. His tiny hands clutched at her sleeve, his breathing uneven. Lisa's fingers curled around the cardboard sign she had scribbled on earlier with whatever broken marker she could find. "Lost my home. My son is hungry. Please help." She had held up the sign for hours, watching as people either averted their gaze or walked past as if she did not exist. Some had sneered, others had muttered under their breath about how she should get a job or stop being lazy. If only they knew. If only they understood how hard she had tried. She had not always been like this. Once, she had been just another working mother, balancing long shifts at a diner while raising Ryan alone. His father had left before he was even born, and Lisa had done everything in her power to ensure that her son never felt the absence of love. But love alone could not keep a roof over their heads. When the diner shut down without notice, she had been left scrambling for any work she could find. 2 months later, she had lost everything. A gust of wind sent a shiver down her spine. She had not eaten properly in days, choosing instead to make sure Ryan had whatever little food they could get. Her body was weak, her mind exhausted, but the one thing that hurt the most was the look in her son's eyes, the silent question he never asked out loud. "Mom, what will we do now?" A pair of well-dressed men exited the gas station, laughing about something on their phones. Lisa straightened, clearing her throat as she tried to speak. "Excuse me, sir." The man barely glanced at her before shaking his head. "Sorry, I don't have cash." She did not even have the strength to be disappointed anymore. Just as she was about to pull Ryan closer to keep him warm, a sleek black SUV pulled up near the curb. Unlike the others who had come and gone, this car did not move forward. It sat there, the engine humming softly. The tinted windows slowly rolled down, and Lisa braced herself for another dismissive comment. Instead, she heard a voice, a familiar voice. "Are you okay, ma'am?" Lisa's heart nearly stopped. She turned her head slowly, barely daring to believe what she was seeing. Will Smith. She blinked, her mind struggling to process the moment. Was she hallucinating? Had the hunger finally driven her to see things? Will stepped out of the SUV, holding an umbrella to shield himself from the rain. His expression was not one of pity, but concern. Genuine concern. He crouched down slightly, meeting Lisa's gaze at eye level. "It's cold out here. How long have you two been sitting here?" Lisa tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Her lips trembled, and for the first time in a long time, not because of the cold. Before she could answer, Ryan stirred beside her, blinking sleepily. Will's gaze softened as he looked at the child. "Hey, little man," he said gently. "What's your name?" Ryan, still half asleep, rubbed his eyes. Ryan." Will smiled. "Nice to meet you, Ryan. You know, I have a rule." Lisa frowned, confused. "A rule?" Will nodded, grinning slightly. "Yeah, I can't walk away from a kid who looks hungrier than I do. And trust me, I can eat a lot." Lisa let out a small, breathless laugh despite herself. Was this real? Was she really sitting here, drenched in the rain, talking to Will Smith? Will straightened, tucking the umbrella under his arm as he took off his jacket. Without a second thought, he draped it over Ryan's tiny shoulders. "That should help a little," he said. "And I think we should get you guys somewhere warm. How about a meal first?" Lisa hesitated. She had met enough people in life to know that kindness often came with conditions. Why would a man like him, a man who had the world at his feet, stop for someone like her? As if reading her thoughts, Will crouched again, his expression serious but kind. "Listen, I don't know your story, but I do know this. Everyone needs help sometimes. You don't have to be ashamed of that." Lisa swallowed hard, fighting back the tears stinging her eyes. She had spent so long trying to be strong that she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone care. She finally nodded. "Okay." Will smiled. "All right, let's get out of this rain. I know a great diner that serves pancakes bigger than your kid's head." Ryan's eyes lit up for the first time in weeks. "Really?" Will chuckled. "Really. But there's only one rule. You gotta promise me you'll eat more than I do. Think you can do that?" Ryan gave a small giggle, nodding. Lisa stood, her legs unsteady, but for the first time in months she felt something other than despair. Hope. Will led them toward the SUV, holding the umbrella over them both as he opened the door. Lisa climbed in cautiously, her heart pounding. The warmth inside the car was overwhelming compared to the icy air outside. As they drove away from the gas station, Lisa stole one last glance through the window. The spot where she had sat for hours, unnoticed, uncared for, was now empty. She turned back, looking at Will Smith as he casually scrolled through his phone. This man, this complete stranger, had just changed everything in a single moment. And deep down, she knew. This was only the beginning. The warmth inside the SUV felt like an entirely different world compared to the freezing rain outside. Lisa held Ryan close, still trying to wrap her head around what was happening. The car smelled of leather and something faintly familiar, maybe cologne or the lingering scent of coffee. It was too surreal. One moment she was sitting on the sidewalk, ignored by the world, and the next, Will Smith was driving her and her son to get food. Ryan, wrapped in Will's oversized jacket, sat quietly, his small hands gripping the fabric as if afraid it would be taken away. He kept sneaking glances at Will, his young mind trying to make sense of the situation. "Are you really the guy from TV?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Will chuckled, glancing at Ryan through the rearview mirror. "Depends. Do I look better in person?" Ryan gave a shy smile but did not answer. Lisa, on the other hand, was still struggling to speak. The entire car ride felt unreal. She had seen Will Smith on screens for years, larger than life, untouchable. Yet here he was, picking up a homeless mother and child in the middle of a storm, acting as if it was just another Tuesday. Lisa cleared her throat. "I don't understand. Why are you doing this?" Will did not take his eyes off the road. "Because I've been where you are." Lisa frowned. But you. Will nodded before she could finish. "Yeah, I've had success. I've had the big houses, the cars, the fame. But what most people don't know is that before all of this, my family didn't always have money. We struggled. I know what it feels like to go to bed hungry, to worry about where you're going to sleep. I got lucky, but not everyone does." Lisa stared at him, stunned. She had never heard that part of his story before. She always assumed celebrities came from a different world, one where struggle was just something they played in movies. The car pulled into the parking lot of a small 24-hour diner, its neon sign flickering in the rain. Will parked and turned back to Lisa and Ryan. "Come on, let's get something warm in you." Lisa hesitated. This felt like a dream, like she would wake up any second and find herself back on that sidewalk, soaking wet and forgotten. But the rumbling in her stomach was real, the exhaustion in her bones was real, and the kindness in Will's eyes seemed real too. Ryan was the first to move, crawling out of the SUV eagerly. Lisa followed, still half in disbelief. Will held the diner door open for them, and the scent of fresh coffee and frying bacon filled the air as they stepped inside. A waitress, probably in her late 50s, walked over, eyeing Lisa's damp clothes with concern before doing a double-take at Will. "Well, I'll be damned," she muttered. "Ain't every day we get movie stars in here?" Will grinned. "Then I guess today's your lucky day. Can we get a booth?" The woman nodded, leading them to a corner booth by the window. Ryan immediately slid in beside his mother, his wide eyes taking in everything. Lisa, feeling self-conscious about her damp hair and worn-out clothes, sat stiffly. Will picked up the menu and handed it to Lisa. "Order whatever you want, no restrictions." Lisa hesitated before glancing at Ryan, whose stomach growled loudly at the sight of the menu. She swallowed her pride and looked at the waitress. "Pancakes? And maybe some eggs?" Will nodded approvingly. "Good choice. And for the little man?" Ryan looked at his mother for approval. When she nodded, he whispered, "Can I have chocolate chip pancakes?" Will placed a hand over his heart. "Man, now I'm jealous. I should have ordered that first." Ryan giggled, and for the first time in weeks, Lisa saw something in his eyes that had been missing. Joy. The waitress took their orders, and Lisa could finally breathe. For the first time in months, she was sitting at a table, knowing her son would eat a warm meal without worrying about tomorrow. She looked at Will, who was casually scrolling through his phone as if picking up struggling mothers and their kids was something he did every day. "Can I ask you something?" she said hesitantly. Will set his phone down. "Shoot. Why didn't you just give me money? A lot of rich people do that to feel better about themselves." Will leaned back, studying her for a moment before speaking. "Because money doesn't fix everything. If I handed you a few $100, it'd help for a little while. But then what? You'd be back in the same place a few days later, still struggling. What you need isn't money, it's a chance." Lisa felt something in her chest tighten. A chance. That was all she had ever wanted. Their food arrived, and for the next 20 minutes, Lisa and Ryan ate like they had never eaten before. The pancakes were warm, fluffy, and tasted like the first good thing that had happened in a long time. Ryan, his face smeared with syrup, looked up at Will. "Are you going to eat too?" Will smirked. "Oh, I will, but I have a rule. I can't eat until I tell a joke first." Ryan's eyes lit up. "What's the joke?" Will cleared his throat, pretending to be serious. "Why did the Scarecrow win an award?" Ryan shrugged. "Because he was outstanding in his field." Lisa groaned, shaking her head. Ryan, however, laughed so hard he nearly choked on his pancake. Will grinned. "That's the best sound in the world, my man." Lisa looked at her son, who was smiling wider than she had seen in months, and suddenly the weight of her struggles felt a little lighter. After finishing their meal, Lisa wiped Ryan's hands with a napkin. She felt better, warmer, not just physically, but emotionally. She had been invisible for so long. Tonight, for the first time in forever, she felt human again. As they walked out of the diner, Lisa expected Will to drop them off somewhere safe and call it a night. But as they reached the car, he turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "You said you lost your job at a diner, right?" Lisa nodded cautiously. Will tapped his fingers against the car roof. "If I could set you up with a new job and a place to stay, no strings attached, would you take it?" Lisa's breath hitched. "Are you serious?" Will smiled. "I don't joke about second chances." Lisa stared at him, emotions crashing over her all at once. This night had already been unbelievable, but now he was offering her something she had not dared to hope for. She looked at Ryan, who was rubbing his tired eyes, completely oblivious to how much their world had just shifted. She turned back to Will, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes." Will Smith nodded as if he had expected that answer. "Then let's get to work." And just like that, her life changed forever. Lisa sat in the back seat of the SUV, her mind racing. The rain had finally eased into a soft drizzle, but the storm inside her had only grown stronger. She stole a glance at Ryan, who was dozing off in Will's oversized jacket, his small chest rising and falling with each deep breath. The warmth of the meal had settled into his body, and for the first time in weeks he looked peaceful. Lisa exhaled slowly, trying to process everything that had happened in the last few hours. She was still struggling to believe it was real. Will Smith. The man she had watched on TV since childhood, the same man who had made her laugh during her hardest days, had not only stopped for her but was now offering her something she had long given up on, a second chance. Her voice was hesitant as she finally broke the silence. You said you could get me a job and a place to stay." Will, who had been focused on the road, nodded. "That's right." Lisa swallowed hard. "But why me?" Will let out a soft chuckle. "Why not you?" She shook her head. "You don't even know me. I could be anyone." Will turned the steering wheel, pulling into a quieter street before stopping at a red light. He glanced at her through the mirror. "I don't need to know your whole life story to see that you're trying. And that's the difference." Lisa felt her throat tighten. She had spent so much time feeling like a failure, like she was drowning in a world that refused to throw her a rope. But here was a man who saw her not as a statistic, not as someone to be pitied, but as a person worth helping. The car rolled forward again, passing through the quieter streets of the city. Lisa glanced outside, recognizing the area. They were heading toward a part of town she had not been to in years. It was where people with real money lived, where the houses had gates and the cars parked in driveways cost more than anything she had ever owned in her life. Her stomach twisted. "Where are we going?" she asked, gripping her hands together. Will gave a small smile. "To meet someone who can help." Lisa's heart pounded. She was not sure what she had expected, but it was not this. She thought maybe he would drop her off at a shelter or arrange for a few nights in a cheap motel. Instead, they pulled into the driveway of a beautiful modern house, its exterior glowing under the dim streetlights. Will parked and turned to her. "Come inside." Lisa hesitated. "Will, He held up a hand. "Listen, I get it. This is overwhelming, but trust me, I wouldn't bring you somewhere unsafe." She looked at Ryan, still sleeping soundly. For him, she would take this step. Taking a deep breath, she carefully stepped out of the car, gathering Ryan in her arms. His small body curled into hers instinctively. Will led the way up the steps, ringing the doorbell. A moment later, the door opened and a woman in her 40s, dressed casually in a sweater and jeans, greeted them with a warm smile. "You must be Lisa," she said kindly, stepping aside. "Come in." Lisa hesitated only for a moment before stepping inside. The house was warm and inviting, decorated with soft tones and comfortable furniture. Nothing about it screamed wealth, yet it felt safe, something she had not felt in a long time. The woman gestured toward the couch. "You can lay him down here if you want." Lisa carefully set Ryan down, watching as he curled into the pillows without waking. Her fingers brushed over his forehead, still amazed at how peaceful he looked. The woman extended her hand. "I'm Diane. Will told me a little about you." Lisa shook her hand, still confused. "Are you his—" Will smirked. "Not my wife, if that's what you're asking." Diane laughed. "No, I work with a charity that helps single mothers get back on their feet. Will has worked with us before, but I've never seen him bring someone directly." Lisa looked at Will in surprise. "You do this a lot?" Will shrugged. "Not often, but when I do, I make sure it counts." Diane led Lisa to the kitchen table where a folder sat. "We have an apartment available not too far from here. It's not fancy, but it's safe, clean, and ready for you to move in." Lisa's breath caught. "Move in?" Diane nodded. "Rent-free for the first 6 months. Enough time to get stable. We also have a job opening at a local bakery. I talked to the owner already. She's willing to meet you tomorrow." Lisa's mind spun. This wasn't just a temporary fix. This was a way out. She looked at Will, emotions threatening to spill over. "Why are you doing this?" Will leaned back, studying her. "Because someone once did it for me." Lisa blinked. "What?" Will sighed, his voice quieter. "When I first got into acting, I made some bad financial choices. I went broke, completely. I was young, dumb, and thought money would always be there. But it wasn't. I was days away from being homeless when a producer I barely knew stepped in. He gave me a job, a small loan, and a second chance. That changed my life. And now, I try to do the same when I can." Lisa stared at him, realization washing over her. He wasn't just helping because he had money, he was helping because he understood. Tears burned at the back of her eyes. She had spent so long fighting, so long carrying the weight of survival, that she had forgotten what it felt like to be seen. Will's voice was gentle. "I'm not giving you charity, Lisa. I'm giving you the same thing someone gave me, a chance. What you do with it is up to you." Lisa swallowed hard, looking down at the paperwork in front of her. It felt like a dream, like any second, she would wake up back on that sidewalk in the rain. But the weight of Ryan's little body sleeping soundly nearby reminded her that this was real. This was happening. With a shaking hand, she picked up the pen and signed. Will smiled. Good choice. Lisa exhaled, letting the reality of it sink in. For the first time in years, she was not just surviving, she was moving forward. As Diane took the paperwork, Will stretched his arms. "Now that that's settled, I have one last question." Lisa looked at him warily. "What?" Will grinned. "What do you call a fake noodle?" Lisa blinked. "What?" Will leaned forward, his face completely serious. "An impasta." There was a beat of silence before Diane groaned. "Oh God, not the dad jokes." Lisa, caught completely off guard, burst into laughter. Not the polite kind, but real, full belly laughter, the kind she had not felt in years. The sound of it even startled Ryan awake, who groggily looked around before mumbling, "What's so funny?" Lisa wiped her eyes, shaking her head. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just a really, really bad joke." Will raised an eyebrow. "Hey, that was gold." Lisa looked at him, still smiling. "Thank you." Will just winked. "I'll see you at the bakery tomorrow." And with that, he walked out, leaving Lisa sitting in the warmth of a home that, for the first time in forever, felt like a future. Lisa woke up to the soft hum of the city outside her window, the warmth of the blanket wrapped around her a foreign but welcome feeling. For the first time in what felt like years, she was waking up in a bed instead of on the cold pavement. The room around her was small but cozy, the pale morning light filtering through the curtains. She turned her head slightly, her gaze landing on Ryan, who was curled up beside her, still asleep. His face was peaceful, his small fingers gripping the edge of the blanket. She could not remember the last time she had seen him sleep this soundly, without shivering, without the constant worry of being woken up by the noise of the streets. She exhaled, sitting up slowly, careful not to wake him. The events of the past 24 hours played in her mind like a dream she was afraid would slip away. Will Smith had not only given them food and warmth for the night, but he had made sure they had a place to stay, a real home, even if it was temporary. She had spent so long preparing for disappointment, for the inevitable moment when things would go wrong again, but as she looked around the small but furnished apartment, she realized something terrifying. For the first time in forever, she felt safe. She pulled the blanket over Ryan's shoulders before quietly slipping out of bed. She stepped onto the soft carpet, her feet tingling at the contrast from the freezing concrete she had been so used to. Her body still ached from weeks of sleeping outside, but today, she felt lighter. She walked toward the small kitchen, opening the fridge, her breath catching when she saw that it was stocked with food. Eggs, milk, fruit, even a few snacks that she knew Ryan would love. She reached for a carton of orange juice, her hands shaking slightly as she poured herself a glass. It was such a simple thing, having food in the fridge. But to her, it felt overwhelming. She had spent months rationing whatever scraps she could find, skipping meals to make sure Ryan had enough, and now there was more than enough for both of them. Her phone buzzed on the counter, startling her out of her thoughts. She hesitated before picking it up, her chest tightening when she saw the name on the screen. Will Smith. She took a deep breath before answering. "Hello?" His voice was relaxed, casual, as if they had known each other forever. "Morning, bakery queen. You awake?" Lisa let out a small laugh, rubbing her forehead. "Barely. I still feel like I'm dreaming." Will chuckled. "Well, better wake up fast. You start work today." Lisa blinked, gripping the phone tighter. "Wait, what?" "You heard me. Maggie's expecting you in 2 hours. No pressure or anything." Lisa's heart pounded. She had known Will had mentioned getting her a job, but she had not expected it to happen this fast. The thought of walking into a workplace after so long felt both exciting and terrifying. She swallowed hard. "I don't know if I'm ready." Will's voice softened. "You are. And if you're not, you'll get ready. That's how it works." Lisa exhaled, looking around the apartment. A week ago, she had been on the verge of giving up. Now she had a home, a job, a chance. She nodded to herself, determination settling in. "Okay, I'll be there." Will's smirk was almost audible through the phone. "That's what I like to hear. Oh, and one more thing." Lisa rolled her eyes. "Do I even want to know?" Will's voice was teasing. "What do you call a fake noodle?" Lisa groaned. "Will, an impasta." Lisa let out an exhausted laugh, shaking her head. "You're the worst." "I know," he said, and then hung up. She stared at her phone for a moment before setting it down, a smile lingering on her face. She had never expected Will Smith to be the person who would change her life, but somehow he had become exactly that. She quickly got ready, brushing out her hair and slipping into the clothes that had been left for her in the closet. Simple jeans and a clean white blouse. It was not much, but it felt like luxury compared to what she had been wearing for weeks. She gently woke Ryan, helping him get dressed before dropping him off at the daycare Diane had arranged for him. He clung to her hand at first, hesitant, but after meeting the other kids and seeing the bright toys scattered across the floor, he slowly let go, his excitement taking over. Lisa knelt beside him, brushing his curls out of his face. "I'll be back before you know it, okay?" Ryan looked up at her, his big brown eyes full of trust. "Promise?" Lisa swallowed hard, nodding. "Promise." Leaving him was difficult, but knowing he was safe made it easier. She hurried to the bakery, nerves twisting in her stomach as she reached the door. The smell of fresh bread and coffee filled the air, instantly soothing her. She hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside. Maggie, the owner, was wiping down the counter when she looked up. She smiled warmly, her gaze kind but sharp. "You must be Lisa." Lisa nodded. "Yes, thank you for—" Maggie waved her off. "None of that. You're here to work, not thank me. Come on, let's get you started." Lisa exhaled, tying the apron Maggie handed her and stepping behind the counter. The next few hours were a blur of learning how to take orders, pour coffee, and handle the cash register. It was overwhelming at first, but Maggie was patient, correcting her when needed but never making her feel inadequate. As she wiped down the counter near the end of her shift, her phone buzzed. She pulled it out, grinning when she saw Will's name. "Will. So, did you burn the place down yet?" "Lisa. Not yet, but I did drop a tray of cinnamon rolls." "Will. You monster." "Lisa. I know. It was tragic." "Will. Guess I'll have to come in and judge the replacements myself." Lisa shook her head, sliding her phone back into her pocket. She had not had someone to joke with like this in years. Later that evening, after picking up Ryan, they walked home together under the dim streetlights. He chattered excitedly about his day at daycare, about the kids he had played with, about the story the teacher had read to them. Lisa listened, soaking in every word, cherishing the normalcy of it all. As they reached the apartment, Ryan suddenly stopped, tugging at her sleeve. She looked down, surprised by the serious expression on his little face. "Mommy," he whispered. She knelt beside him, brushing his hair back. "What is it, baby?" Ryan hesitated before speaking, his voice small but sure. "Are we going to be okay now?" Lisa felt something inside her tighten. She had spent so long pretending to be strong, so long fighting to keep him from seeing how scared she was. But now, she did not have to pretend. She cupped his face gently, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Yes, sweetheart," she said, her voice firm. "We're gonna be okay." And for the first time in forever, she truly believed it. Lisa woke up to the soft hum of the city beyond her window. the warmth of the blanket wrapped around her still feeling unfamiliar. Every morning she had to remind herself that this was real. She was no longer waking up on a park bench, no longer shielding Ryan from the cold with nothing but her body, no longer waiting for the sun to rise just to feel a little warmth. She was home. She had a bed. She had a job. These were simple things most people took for granted, but to her, they were everything. She turned her head, smiling as she saw Ryan curled up beside her, his small hand clutched around the edge of the blanket. He looked so peaceful, so content. It was a stark contrast to how he used to sleep, restless, shivering, always holding on to her, as if he was afraid she would disappear in the night. She leaned over and pressed a soft kiss to his forehead before carefully slipping out of bed. She tiptoed toward the kitchen, reaching for the kettle to make herself a cup of coffee. The routine had become something she cherished. It made her feel normal again. Her phone buzzed on the counter, the screen lighting up with a familiar name. She smiled, shaking her head as she picked it up. "Will, you burned down the bakery yet?" Lisa chuckled as she typed back. "Lisa, nope. But I did drop a whole tray of muffins yesterday. It was a tragedy." "Will, unforgivable. I might have to reconsider my faith in you." Lisa, "Probably for the best." "Will, you're getting there, bakery queen." Lisa set her phone down, still smiling. She had not expected this kind of friendship, but over the past few weeks, Will had made it a habit to check in on her almost daily. He did not have to. He had already done more than enough. But he did anyway, and somehow it made everything feel a little easier. She glanced at the time and hurried to get ready. Another day at work, another step towards something better. The bakery was already bustling when she arrived, the scent of fresh bread and cinnamon filling the air. Maggie greeted her with a nod before motioning toward the counter. "You're on coffee duty today," she said. "Try not to flood the place." Lisa grinned. "No promises." The hours passed quickly, her hands moving instinctively as she took orders, poured coffee, and served pastries. She had fallen into a rhythm, one that made her feel steady, capable. She had spent so long feeling like she was drowning, like she was constantly running out of air, but here, she could breathe. She could stand on her own 2 feet. By midday, she wiped her hands on a napkin and stepped outside for a short break. The crisp air felt refreshing, clearing her mind as she leaned against the brick wall. Her phone buzzed again, and she glanced at the screen, expecting another sarcastic comment from Will. But it was a different name this time. Diane. Her stomach tightened as she answered. "Hello?" Diane's voice was calm, but there was an urgency beneath it. "Lisa, I need you to come to my office as soon as your shift is over." Lisa's heart skipped a beat. "Is something wrong?" Diane hesitated. "It's about your apartment. Just get here as soon as you can." The call ended, and Lisa stood frozen for a moment, her chest tightening. She had been here before. The moment when everything seemed too good to be true, the moment when the other shoe dropped. She forced herself to take a deep breath before heading back inside. Whatever it was, she would face it. She had come too far to let fear control her now. The hours dragged on, each minute stretching unbearably long as she waited for her shift to end. When the time finally came, she practically ran to the small office where Diane worked. She pushed the door open, her pulse pounding. Diane looked up from her desk, her face unreadable. "Lisa, sit down." Lisa did, her hands clenched together. "Just tell me." Diane exhaled. "There was a mistake with your lease. Somehow the paperwork wasn't fully processed and the landlord wants to reevaluate the agreement." Lisa felt her breath catch. "What does that mean?" Diane hesitated before continuing. "It means there's a chance you might have to move out unless we can fix it." Lisa's hands trembled. No, I can't lose that place, Ryan, Diane reached across the desk, her voice firm. "I'm not saying it's definite, but I need to know that you're prepared if we have to fight this." Lisa swallowed hard. She had fought for everything she had. She was not going to lose it now. She took a deep breath. What do I need to do? Diane nodded, handing her a folder. Sign these, and maybe call your friend. He might have some connections. Lisa hesitated. She hated asking Will for more help. He had already done so much. But this was about Ryan. She would do whatever it took. She stepped outside, her hands gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. She did not want to make the call, but she knew she had to. She took a deep breath and dialed. The line rang twice before he picked up. Lisa? His voice was lighter than she expected, casual, as if he was not expecting bad news. She closed her eyes, forcing her voice to stay steady. Will, I need your help. The shift in his tone was immediate. Where are you? Lisa told him everything in a rush, her words tumbling over each other. She expected him to hesitate, to ask questions, but he did not. I'm on my way, he said. The call ended. Lisa stared at her phone, her heart pounding. She had not realized until now how much she had been holding it all in. The fear, the exhaustion, the weight of always having to fight for survival. 15 minutes later, a sleek black SUV pulled up in front of the office. The door swung open, and Will stepped out, his expression unreadable. He did not waste time with pleasantries. Let's go fix this. Lisa followed, trying to keep up as he led her toward the leasing office. When they walked in, the landlord barely looked up, shuffling papers as he spoke. The agreement was never finalized. We're reviewing whether... Will cut him off. No, you're not. The landlord blinked, finally looking up. His expression shifted as he recognized Will. Mr. Smith. Will placed his hands on the desk, his voice calm but firm. This woman and her son are staying. Fix the paperwork. Lisa watched in stunned silence as Will handled everything with a few phone calls. Within minutes, the issue was resolved. The landlord stammered through an apology before assuring them that Lisa's apartment was secure. Will turned to her once they stepped outside. It's done. Lisa could barely process it. How did you? Will smirked. You'd be surprised what people do when they realize someone's watching. Lisa let out a shaky breath. I don't know how to thank you. Will shrugged. You don't have to. Lisa looked at him, really looked at him. Why do you... Will. You're getting better, though. Maggie said you're starting to look like a real baker. Lisa stared at the message for a moment, warmth blooming in her chest. She had never expected this kind of support, never imagined that someone like Will Smith would care about whether she succeeded or not. But over the past few weeks, he had checked in on her every single day, always making sure she was okay, always reminding her that she was not alone. She glanced at the clock. It was almost time to get ready for work. She finished her coffee, then turned back to the bedroom, kneeling beside Ryan and gently brushing his curls away from his forehead. His eyes fluttered open, sleepy but content. Morning, baby, she whispered. Ryan blinked up at her, his little voice groggy. Do I have to go to daycare today? Lisa smiled, pressing a kiss to his forehead. Just for a little while, and then we'll have pancakes for dinner, okay? Ryan grinned sleepily. Promise? Lisa nodded. Promise. After getting him dressed and dropping him off at the daycare, Lisa made her way to the bakery. The scent of fresh bread and cinnamon greeted her as she walked through the door, the familiar warmth of the kitchen instantly calming her nerves. Maggie was already behind the counter, rolling out dough with practiced ease. She glanced up as Lisa tied her apron. You're early, Maggie noted. Lisa shrugged. Figured I'd get a head start. Maggie smirked. You mean you figured you'd try not to drop anything today? Lisa groaned. That too. The morning rush was steady, customers coming and going, the hours passing quickly. Lisa had started to find her rhythm, her hands moving instinctively as she poured coffee, arranged pastries, and greeted customers with ease. She still made mistakes, still fumbled now and then, but Maggie was patient. And for the first time in a long time, Lisa felt like she was good at something again. At lunchtime, she stepped outside for a break, pulling out her phone to check her messages. There was another text from Will. Will. Busy later? Lisa frowned, quickly typing back. Lisa. I have work until 5. Why? Will. Come to the diner after. I want to show you something. Lisa hesitated. Will never asked for anything in return. He had helped her get a job, get a home, rebuild her life, all without expecting anything. But now he wanted to show her something. She had no idea what it could be, but she trusted him. Lisa. Okay, I'll be there. After her shift ended, Lisa picked up Ryan and headed to the diner where it had all started. The moment she stepped inside, memories flooded back. The rain, the exhaustion, the desperation. The moment Will had changed everything. He was already there, sitting in the same booth they had sat in that night. As she approached, he grinned and gestured to the seat across from him. Ryan climbed in beside her, looking up at Will expectantly. Lisa raised an eyebrow. Okay, what's this about? Will slid a small envelope across the table. Open it. Lisa hesitated before carefully pulling out the paper inside. Her breath caught as she read the words printed on it. Apartment lease agreement. Her eyes widened. Will, what is this? Will leaned back, watching her reaction. You've been in the charity apartment for a while now. It's time for something more permanent. Lisa's hands shook as she held the paper. You bought me an apartment? Will laughed. Number you earned this. The lease is in your name. The payments? Already covered for the next year. That gives you time to save up, get fully stable, and take over when you're ready. Tears welled in Lisa's eyes. She had been grateful for everything Will had already done, but this was something she had not even dared to dream about. She shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to thank you. Will smiled. You don't have to. Just promise me one thing. Lisa swallowed hard. Anything. Will met her gaze, his voice steady. When you see someone struggling, someone who's where you used to be, help them. That's how you thank me. Lisa nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Ryan, unaware of the weight of the moment, tugged on Will's sleeve. Does this mean we get pancakes? Will laughed, ruffling the boy's hair. Of course it does. Lisa let out a watery chuckle, wiping her eyes as she nodded. Yeah, baby. It means we get pancakes. That night, as she tucked Ryan into bed, she sat beside him for a long time, running her fingers through his curls. He had been through so much, had seen things no child should ever see. But now he would grow up knowing stability, knowing safety. She kissed his forehead, whispering softly, We're gonna be okay. And for the first time, she truly believed it. As she stepped out into the living room, her phone buzzed one last time. Will. Hey, I just realized, why did the baker go to therapy? Lisa rolled her eyes, already bracing for the punchline. Lisa. Why? Will. Because he needed it, Lisa groaned, shaking her head. Lisa. Good night, Will. Will. Good night, bakery queen. She set her phone down, smiling as she looked around her new home. She had fought so hard for this moment, and now she had not only survived, she had won. This is the power of kindness. One moment, one decision can change a life forever. Will Smith did not just help Lisa. He gave her a second chance, a future. But here is the real question. What if you were that person for someone else? What if you had the power to change a life with just one act of kindness? The world is full of people like Lisa, people who just need a chance. Will you be the one to give it? If this story inspired you, share it. Let kindness spread. Because sometimes the smallest act can create the biggest impact.